I want to welcome you to our event, Analyzing Power in Mental Health Care. This is part of our Transformative Mental Health Talk series. And I want to introduce myself. My name is Noah Gokul. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm the program manager at IDHA. I was the project lead for the Transformative Mental Health core curriculum, of which the faculty that are speaking tonight are coming from. And I am currently based in Berlin. And yeah, I am a brown, non-binary person of color with long black hair, and I have a keffiyeh, and underneath I have a brown shirt on, and behind me in my background I have a white wall. And so I'm going to run through some slides, giving you some housekeeping for our event tonight, and then we'll get started with our panelists. Thank you so much for being here. So to start this event, we want to really just acknowledge all of the grief that people are maybe feeling when they're coming into this space tonight. I know that for myself, I have been navigating so much grief, fast grief, ever since the beginning of October. And so this, is affecting everything that we're doing and how we show up to these kind of spaces and conversations. And also recognizing that this is due to an ongoing genocide happening in Gaza, and multiple genocides that are happening across the world as well. And in particular, my heart really goes out to the folks in Rafah. And so, wanting to really bring this into the space and hope that you can feel comfortable bringing your own grief and how you're feeling into this space as we're trying to break down the walls of where these kind of emotions can be accepted. So, giving you a little accessibility overview. So we have a closed captioning offering for tonight. So if you want to turn that on, you can go to the bottom screen of your Zoom and turn that on. We also have two lovely ASL interpreters, and so they are going to be joining us for the whole evening tonight. And you can toggle between the speaker and gallery view during the event to adjust your view. We are recording this event, so yeah, we will be anonymizing all of the recording. So, any faces, names for participants will be removed, and registrants will be the only ones who get that recording. We also have a tech team helping with support for all of the tech tonight. So if you have any issues with tech, you can reach out to Jesse, IDHA Tech, which is, you can find Jesse in the list of participants. If you have any other questions, you can also email our email here, contact@idhanyc.org. So to ground our session, I want to just share about the Institute for Development of Human Arts. This is our organization, and we are a community of current/prior mental health service users, survivors, psychiatrists, psychologists, and other clinicians, activists, and artists who come together to transform mental health care. And what we do is advance critical, effective, and scalable alternative approaches to mental health through collaborative education and community development. How we're unique is we're integrating experiential and academic knowledge, and we challenge the idea that only those who work in the fields of mental health are the experts, and that we're shifting power dynamics in a system that generally only privileges professional experience. So these are our IDHA community agreements. They are part of all of our spaces. So we ask you to, really integrate and agree to these when you're in this event space. So the first one is shared expertise and wisdom, that everyone brings their own expertise to this conversation. We all gain from our various forms of expertise. Collective liberation, that overcoming oppression aids everyone's liberation. It's our responsibility to, dismantle all forms of oppression in the spirit of solidarity. We also hold each other accountable. And we also listen like allies, that we really listen to all of the diverse choices, perspectives that people have, and that we may disagree, but we don't judge or invalidate other people's experiences. So this is the Transformative Mental Health talk, and this is based off of the curriculum, Transformative Mental Health core curriculum. So we wanted to share what is transformative mental health, and this is kind of the lens, the guiding lens that we talk about at IDHA, on how we're thinking about personal and collective healing that's rooted in systemic change. So thinking about the various intersecting systems of oppression and how they affect our bodies, our minds, and our communities. It's also experiential knowledge, that our lived and embodied experiences are really the most powerful kind of form of knowledge that we can create, and that all training and best practices really is with indirect collaboration of those most impacted. And also holistic care, that we are uplifting all of the different frameworks, voices, tools that bring us to a fuller understanding of mental health, that there's a lot of different ways to heal or care for one another, and we also have to address the whole person. All right, so with that, I want to just give some brief opening remarks to kind of share about our event tonight, and then I'm going to invite our lovely panelists to introduce themselves, and then we'll do our questions. But so yeah, just to ground our event, we are, as I said, in this transformative mental health talk, and it is based on the curriculum and thinking about transformative mental health and how to apply it to our lives and our work. And this event is analyzing power in mental health. And so just when I began this talk and talking about grief, talking about genocide, we really need to bring in all of these different factors, and how power and oppression and identity, all of these factors cannot be separated from our mental health, and from care, and from systems of care. And so much of the mental health system today really encourages this disconnection from our body, from our mind, from our spirit. And it really hinders us from really being able to show up authentically. And I know that a lot of providers are struggling to really show up right now in this moment where there's ongoing genocides happening, not knowing how to navigate, and the mental health education they received does not allow for holding all of these complexities. So this is where we are bringing in this idea of transformative mental health to kind of provide a roadmap for meeting this moment, to recognize all of the connections between Gaza, Congo, Sudan, and how that has an impact on our personal and collective transformation, and really that we're all in this together for collective liberation, and that providers and people with lived experience, we all have a role to play based on our own individual passions and capacity, and everything that we care about. So I'm so excited for our panelists who are thinking about how their own practices really cultivate this self-awareness, and thinking about power in their lives and works, and how this really is fostered, this transformative mental health is fostered in their work, so that they're co-creating these liberatory futures with their clients and with the people that they are in community with. So with that, I'm very, very excited for our panelists to come on, and yeah, I'm going to introduce them. Well, I'm not going to introduce them, but they're going to introduce themselves with their pronouns, a brief visual description, and the question, what roles and relationships to mental health do you hold, and how do they shape how you show up to this conversation today? So we'll get it started. I'd love to welcome Anjali to come off mute and share first.
For sure. Thank you so much for that introduction, and to our interpreters and all of y'all for being here. This is Anjali speaking. My name is Anjali Nath Upadhyaya. She and they pronouns are just fine by me. And I am in part, in terms of academic training, a political scientist, a mad political scientist. So you can interpret that in multiple meanings of the term mad, both one, in touch with my anger on a good day, in touch with collective anger on a good day, and open to confronting and challenging the kinds of paradigms that would have us disconnected from our anger. And then also mad in terms of expansive beyond DSM and ICD categories. And so in part, I am very grateful to not be working full-time in the field of anything related to mental health, psychology, or psychiatry. I do political education and community full-time, and that's what I've been doing in a project for the past 8 years called Liberation Spring. One of the offerings that we have there is a political psychology class that is called Gaslight the System: The Politics of Madness and Sanity. And so part of how that shows up here is in my profound commitment to and real sense of honor around being able to support people checking the way that mainstream, especially patriarchal and Eurocentric ideas about madness and sanity keep the status quo perpetuated unnecessarily. And especially when we're not open to having conversations about, and not just questioning intellectually, say, at what point in a conversation do you not move past, out of whether it is for some folks in terms of internalized sanism, feeling like, oh, someone's going to call me crazy. And maybe in terms of our lived experiences, I literally don't have the privilege to potentially have that happen to me right now, with the consequences that that could entail, right? And so how do we collectively sense make around the way that the ongoing threat of sanism is still limiting our political horizons and even our imagination of what isn't possible? How can we set down, the way that sanism is getting in the way of even our visions of freedom, even what we're capable of sharing with one another? How else, does that impact the way that I show up right now on this call? I am devastated on this call right now. And it's important for me as an accountability practice, knowing students of mine are here. Welcome. It's so wonderful to have y'all here. I'm devastated right now. We can share that with one another, just like IDHA modeled for us, starting off with that acknowledgement of grief. We can also do that. And if folks are invested in some mainstream careerist idea of what is or is not professional, that actually makes us more professional, demonstrating that self-awareness, having the courage where appropriate to be able to name that. And the last thing I'll share for the moment, because there's so much more to get into, but wanting to check the time is we also don't need to cater to any kind of interpretation of professionalism that anyone has framed up for us, let alone if it's an interpretation of professionalism that goes against what our movement elders have taught us, that goes against our ancestral ethics, that goes against what our conscience might be inviting us to otherwise in this moment. That's all I'll share for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anjali. Oh yeah, go ahead, Evan. I was just gonna make sure you knew you were next.
Yeah, perfect. I didn't know if we wanted to do like the soft handoff, but the first thing I gotta say, well, I'll start. So my name is Evan August, he, him, uh, visual description, black man, beard, green sweater with the white background. And I have to also share my excitement that exists right next to a lot of the grief that Anjali shared, because again, I recognize a lot of the names on this call. And for also some of my fellow speakers, I've been a big fan of their work. So to be here sharing space to rap with y'all for a bit, it's a deep honor, right? And again, for the people who are here to also share space, I know a lot of people here are deep movement builders as well. So just to be in this space, I pull energy from that. So that's the first piece. In terms of my relationship to the mental health, what I'm bringing here, by training, I'm a PhD in clinical psychology with a specialty in forensic psychology. But the tradition that I pull from is Black liberation psychology. Right? So for me, that means pulling from traditions, pulling from ancestors, pulling from, as Anjali put it, movement elders who've been committed to materially dismantling the structures and the systems that have served to create so much pain and despair in all of our lives. Right? I come to this space as somebody who deeply loves people who've been impacted by institutionalization, who deeply loves people who've been impacted by the legacy of colonial violence, who deeply loves people who have endured incarceration. And I also come here as somebody who still has a level of hope that the people here, the people beyond here, have the social technologies, have the commitments, have the passions to materially shift and again co-create the models of care that we know work, that we know we need. And so again, to be here, I'm excited to again share space and build with a lot of y'all for the first time. So this is fantastic.
So, good evening, everyone. This is Mayowa Obasaju. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a Black femme presenting woman with brown skin. I have small locks in my hair with maroon tips. I have multicolored glasses on. And right now, I'm wearing a black and brown sweater, and I have a virtual Zoom background of a bookcase. And so, um, how do I introduce myself? Because honestly, when I think of who I am on the day to day, part of what's important to me is that I am a mom, I'm a partner, I'm an oldest daughter, I'm an immigrant, and I'm a child of immigrants. I'm Nigerian born and American raised. I am a lifelong lover of learning. I love to read, I love to dance, and I'm a trained clinical and community psychologist. I focused on trauma and healing. And when I think about trauma, I think about it from kind of all of the levels, all of the ways, but I also think about healing that way too, outside of the room or rooms of therapy. I think about how I was brought to this work, and I was brought to this work listening on the conversations of my parents and their friends. I was brought to this work at dinner tables where they didn't shove little kids away, but they let us listen, and I asked questions, and I asked so many questions. Why was I learning one thing at the dinner table and going to class in the United States and learning something else? Why were they talking to me about democracy when I knew that you had one of our leaders killed so that you could have more access to oil? So how do you tell me you're democratic? And how do you tell me that you are the light for the world? And so it was these dichotomies. And at the same time, I liked a lot of my teachers. So how do I hold that? How do I hold you as a human being? And how do I hold your deeply oppressive nationalistic belief systems? And then how do I hold myself in all of that too? And that's part of what led me to the field of psychology, because it's the only place where I could find people asking some of these questions and actually trying to provide some answers. But then also getting into the system and being like, ooh, your your answers are deeply colonial, deeply harmful, deeply hurtful. I trained in Atlanta, Georgia, and I was so well known at Karis Bookstore. Shout out to Karis, independently owned feminist bookstore. And they were like, "Why are you always here?" And I said, I need another education. I need a secondary education because what they're teaching me, I know this isn't it. I like literally, I know from my life, I know from what they're saying that this is not it. You don't know the wisdom of my folks. You don't know the wisdom of my grandmother. Like, you want to talk feminism? I'm going to shout out grandma, who was the first one in her village to own a 2-story building, not first woman, first person, right? Because she was traveling around the country selling and raising, selling items and raising her 7 children. And when her second husband acted out, she was like, goodbye. I got this. And so like those are the stories. That was what brought me to this place. And those are the stories that I want as somebody who journeys with folks on their mental health journeys. I want those stories. I want those wisdoms. I want those connections. And I want to sit in the gratitude of bearing witness, of you allowing me to bear witness to those stories. Because in as much as I am a facilitator, I hope, and a journeyer with, I also utilize mental health services. I've also been healed by people who sat with me when I was in the depths of despair and pain, and I still go there. And so, as both somebody who is with people in it and has also been benefiting from it, I still know that it needs to be something different. It needs to be another world. And so I'll stop there and thank you all for being here and bearing witness to us.
This is Umu speaking. Hi, I'm Umu. My last name is Silla. My pronouns are my name, she, and they. I am coming to this call a little griefy and weepy and just like not my favorite facilitator self, panelist self. And also I'm really excited about being able to like be in spaces where that's okay and I can still co-create wisdom with y'all without having this part of me feel the need to like perform perfectionism. And so I'll name that first. And now I'll do a visual description. I'm a dark-skinned Black person with black and blondish shaved hair. I'm wearing 2 silver hoop earrings in both of my earlobes with white circular rimmed glasses. The long sleeve that I'm wearing is colorful and you can see shades of red and green and blue. I feel like a 90s cutie when I wear it. Lastly, related to my visual description, these are my business shark shoes that I'm wearing right now. His name is Bertram, and I wear these and I'm sharing them with you because professionalism involves shoes like this, you know, professionalism involves sharing things about like how you're feeling on calls. Professionalism involves like silliness. And so that's my little brief intro before I talk about who I am and where I come from in my relationship to mental health. I am Senegalese born, American raised. I like the way you said that, Mayowa. I'm always like, how do I tell people that like I'm African, so don't play with me, okay? But the American influence is here. It's present and I can't deny that. So immigrant born, American raised, child of immigrants, eldest daughter, love my brother deeply, which is part of why I'm pretty griefy today. I came to mental health and like having mental health words by virtue of just training to be a therapist. Previous to that, I would say that I didn't really have a relationship to like my inner world. It was really about surviving, making sure that I actualize the American dream, you know, ensuring that my parents' movement to this country, the belly of the beast, was not for nothing. And so I worked hard in academia, whatever that might mean, and I did the things they told me to do, and I did it really fast. And so as a result of that, it impacted my body, mind in ways that really surprised me in 2020, which is when I was forced to cultivate a relationship to my body, mind, because it just stopped. Things stopped moving the ways I was expecting. I was unable to just navigate my worlds in the ways that I was used to. And so I go to get diagnosed with something. They give me a cyclothymia diagnosis. I don't really know what that is. They could have chosen any concoction and gave me a label for it. But I know that I have, and I have always had a relationship to the unseen, right? As a virtue of my Africanness. I don't know what's out there, but I know that we can't see all of it. We don't know all of it. And there are people that see things that I don't see. And I think that's beautiful and incredible and super impactful in terms of our ability to see the futures we're looking to see, if that makes sense, right? And so, like Anjali mentioned earlier, Satanism is a part of our lives, but not only Satanism, anti-Black Satanism, anti-Black Satanism. And part of my passion is to support people in decentering the mental health field as it stands and putting the power of care back into the hands of the people, especially because a lot of us as providers only get to see the people we co-create spaces with for an hour a week if we're lucky. And that's not going to, in my humblest of opinions, contribute to the kind of care that we need in order to sustain the revolution that we're contributing towards, in order to sustain the solidarity that we are bound to practice in as human beings. And so I am the creative radical mental health first aid. I've done that with IDHA in the past with an interpreter, and that was really lovely. I'm super happy to be on this panel with you all today. My words don't feel as clear as I'm like speaking. And so at some points today during the panel, I may choose to drop some sentences and move on if I feel as though the sentences aren't feeling clear. And so that's part of my practice in like anti-professionalism. And I think that's all I'll say for now. Bertram and I, thank you for being here.
I need to know where to get those slippers because my
I'm gonna
feet
drop the
are
link.
always cold and I have terrible circulation and those look like the remedy. So yeah, appreciate that in advance. Wow. Well, thank you so much for everybody's amazing introductions. I'm so, yeah, just so glad that you all are here today. I'm going to start with this first question, which is directed for everyone to answer. So you can feel free to kind of jump in however you see fit. But this question really speaks to kind of the heart of this event in thinking about analyzing power in mental health. So how do you politicize your mental health practice? And what role does analyzing power play in this? And it's a super big question, so feel free to just take it wherever you want.
I'm happy to jump in first. I would just share that mental health practice, this is Anjali speaking, by the way, is always already political. Definitely in this moment in history and for the rest of our lives will always already be political. So then perhaps a curiosity might be, in what ways is mental health practice political? And to be able to answer that question definitely in part requires checking into those power dynamics that you spoke of, right? How power is showing up. So even right in engaging the curiosity to start, what is mental health? How do we understand a practice, right? Ideas have genealogies, just like we have genealogies. And so there's nothing like tracing the genealogies of the ideas that people are engaging. Like, what is a feeling state? What is an emotion? What's an acceptable emotion? And for who? What are unacceptable emotions? Right? Are there some emotions that are so-called bad? Are there some emotions that are good? How does happiness get framed up? What even would be a goal or goals of a mental health practice? And who gets to author or co-author what those goals are? Are they spoken at the outset? Are they consensual? Is there self-determination at play as we gauge what might actually be a good fit collectively for our communities? Lots of people don't engage in questioning, right, these genealogies as they're getting perpetuated, but the questions remain, and the impact, the consequences, the implications remain, regardless of whether or not we're asking those questions. So I would just start off with that heaping dose of humility. And then when we trace the genealogy of the ideas that we're even using to communicate, in what languages, as opposed to what other languages that we could be communicating in, verbally and non-verbally, then that makes space for us to maybe unlearn some of the genealogies that we don't want to keep nourishing, possibly remember some others, maybe even imagine some of our own.
This is Umu speaking. I want to offer some definitions of power that I've come across to really ground us, I think, in a shared knowledge before moving forward. I want to name that these definitions of power are not the only definitions of power. I find it important to ask people, ask institutions, ask collectives to define power and to define their relationship to power. And so the definitions that I'll offer, one of them is from someone on Instagram. Their name is Third Space Somatics. They name that power works through shaping narratives, and narratives shape emotions, and emotions shape actions. And so it's really important to know, especially I think with the wisdom of the body mind, that we have power in our bodies, that our bodies are able to express power, and it's important to explore how that expression impacts other people. Another definition that I'll read that I really like is from someone on Instagram as well, Spiderweb Somatics. They read, power is resources and energy that is amassed into one place or condensed. The ability to actually have agency that has a measurable impact on the world around one, shape others and our own experiences. Energy shared between bodies, human and other than. I'll put those in the chat also so folks are able to read it for accessibility reasons. And so I wanted to read those two definitions of power first, or just reflections on power, and name that in mental health care, we are deliberately, as therapists, as psychiatrists, as other mental health workers that have to have this relationship to licensing and the ethics board, we are deliberately not taught to share power with the therapy seekers and the clients that come into the room. We are deliberately shown how to have power over people. And so it is in our best interest as people that are looking to shift our relationship to these things, to explore how we can actively and tangibly share power in the room, to explore how we can actively and tangibly use our bodies as vessel for that transformation that we're looking to see. And so those are some of my initial notes, that it's really easy to just have power over a therapy seeker and just move on. It's much harder to really slow the process down and explore how we can shift the status quo in order for people to receive the type of care that they're looking to actually receive.
And this is my way speaking. I'm really with the definitions of power that you shared. The language around it is so much more person-centered. And I think when I think it, I almost had a hard time with the question, how do you politicize your mental health practice? Because for me, it becomes, you know, we've said it over and over. I know it's been said over and over again, but the personal is political. And I inherently understand myself as a political being. So I don't know how else to be, and not just in my mental health practice, but I don't know how to be in my spaces in a non-politicized way. Like I don't in many ways I feel like my existence is not feel like my existence is politicized and political. And so it's a narrative and a story that I was born into. And so then for me the question becomes, to some degree, what do I do with my politicization? And part of the what do I do is, who do I do it with? So there is my relationship for people or peoples in the room, because I love groups, because I think that offers another space of, let's talk about power amongst ourselves, but also who am I accountable to, right? Outside of the room, who am I accountable to, and who am I in collective with? Who am I learning from and with? Who am I having those conversations to keep me honest? Because, quote unquote, what I'm doing in the room is supposed to just be between me and one other person, or me and a group of people. And, so not for nothing, I can come to this space and tell y'all whatever I want to tell you. And unless my clients want to say something and be like, actually, then, I say this about people, like personal stuff, around writers that I've met in person. I was like, oh, you wrote yourself real well. All that stuff that you wrote, and now I'm sharing space. And so to some degree, it's also like, well, I can speak myself real well in this space. So then it becomes, who am I accountable to, and how do I make that accountability like out there? How am I not scared to receive that feedback? And I do think that being part of it is being willing to speak, being willing to write, being willing to name the things in multiple spaces, in multiple parts of your life, being willing to slow down, being willing to be honest, being willing to be transparent. I mean, so much of my work, I started this work as trauma work. I added the trauma and healing because I saw what was happening to people in my family, to people in my communities, and I knew it wasn't just like an individual thing. I saw the systems, I saw the colonialism, and if you're around trauma, it's there. It is inherently political what people identify as being traumatic. Who gets to define trauma? Who gets to define how you react to it? Who gets to define what is healthy? Who gets to define consent and what you should have or should not have been doing, either as an individual or as a group of people, as a race, right? Who deserves to be traumatized? So it just feels like it has to be there. And then for trauma to end, it can never be individual. It has to be collective, right? We have to stop doing the things that we are doing as a system and create something new. And so then it all has to be political, like every piece of it. And I'll just add one piece. I teach as well, and so for me, that's part of my mental health practice, because it's me in different spaces. And what am I teaching folks? What is the department wanting me to teach? What am I teaching? How am I accountable to students, right? How am I getting that feedback? How am I present with what's coming up and what's not coming up, and the hurt that I feel as like someone with power as the teacher, and then students are saying things that are oh so painful about my own identity, and then how do I react in that space so I can come down hard with the power, but I'm trying to be something different and do something different. So like, where is all of that? And then also, who do I go to help me with all of that?
I'm deeply appreciating. Oh, this is Evan speaking, and I'm deeply appreciating being in collective with people here, because as you all speak, I just feel such deep resonance with all that's being stated. And so I guess maybe to not even to round out, but to add maybe some other particularities that I try to uphold. Off of what Maya was saying, I was thinking about Linda James Meyer's definition of power as the ability to define reality, right? And as we co-create these new definitions, these new ways of being, right? Like such beautiful things were stated about how to negotiate professionalism, how to negotiate what is seen and unseen. That all exists from the context in which many of us, through threat and not just threat, but lived experiences of violence, still have to contend with the reality that we did not have the opportunity to co-create, right? And so when I think about what politicizing mental health practice and politicizing practice looks like for me, it's making sure all of the work is grounded in material movement, right? Coming from that political tradition. I do a lot of work with the Association of Black Psychologists, who at this point, a lot of the elders are starting to imagine themselves, not starting, they have been imagining themselves as more than just, are doing away with the idea of psychologists, right? But the very foundations of that organization being rooted in the politics of the Black Panthers, for instance. Some of those initial elders having played a role in training Fred Hampton and a number of those revolutionaries, right? Through them coordinating community-based African-centered circles called the South Boney Healing Circles, right? That moves past, again, like it's an ability in which we have that opportunity to define reality, give people that force. And then in those co-created spaces, organize, right, to bring about those futures. In terms of the work I do in Haiti, is grounding that with in culture company, right? Moving forward with a decolonial future for the land of IET, right? Beyond the colonial imaginations of the limitations people place on those peoples who are currently enduring such tremendous violence, right? Such tremendous fear and for many hopelessness, right? How through political organization, right, can we bring about the type of decolonial futures that people desperately need, right? So it's connecting the practice to that political project, right? Through, yes, right, refining mental health practice, but also being based in political movement, is what I would say.
Thank you all for just sharing based on your own experiences and perspectives, and each bringing such nuance and yeah, just eloquence to this question, this really wide question. I have a few questions for people specifically that other panelists can feel free to jump in on as well. I had a question specifically for Anjali to talk about how do you connect transformative mental health to this moment as we bear witness to multiple genocides?
Yeah, thank you for that question. There's so much that we could get into there. This is Anjali speaking, by the way. I mean, I would just be remiss to not signal boost that shout out to the Black Panther Party for self-defense first and foremost. So Evan, thank you for bringing them into the space. That's really important, especially as I steward a project that was birthed in the Bay Area and, right, the Oakland, California, right, Huichin, unceded, right, currently occupied Ohlone territory is the foundation place of the political education project that I steward. So to, for example, wonder why was the last point 10 of the Black Panther Party's 10-point plan actually revised, updated, specifically calling for people's community control of modern technology? Because maybe if people had community control over modern technology, Elon Musk would not be set to be the world's first trillionaire in a couple of decades, in part because of the blood cobalt that he's banking off of for his Teslas that is currently being vampirically extracted from the Democratic Republic of the Congo, where over 90% of the cobalt on the planet Earth is currently based, right? So what so seriously can we remember from what is our responsibility for those of us that have had the honor to learn some of those movement lessons? Is our responsibility to carry those calls, that conviction forward into the present, right? What would Huey Newton have to say about Elon Musk being the richest person in the world off of the backs of indigenous Bolivians so that he can steal the lithium also to mix with that Congolese cobalt to be able to frame up electric vehicles, right, as a commodity that he can bank off of. There are so many gems for us to learn from here, not having to reinvent the wheel. So first off, right, in terms of our unlearning and remembering and imagining, making the most of this honor of being able to do that collectively, right? Receive that feedback from folks who have come before and those of us doing this work in other spaces in this moment. Like I heard you speaking to, Mayowa, thank you so much for bringing in that piece around feedback. What an honor to receive feedback from folks. And so part of how I understand the responsibility of folks who are committed to transformative mental health in this moment of multiple intersecting genocides is understanding to the best of our ability what is even going on, first and foremost. Being engaged in that constant process of discernment, right? So political education, and then as the propaganda and the psychological warfare around us changes, we also need to be dynamic and paying attention to the psychological operations that are getting weaponized against our loved ones. So then we can support people in shedding them, right? In unlearning them. And part of what that looks like today is demilitarizing our minds, right? So it is not just the US military industrial complex, definitely them first and foremost, but then also the Zionist entities, respective military industrial complex that has been coming for our folks all over the planet, right? For well over half a century at this point. And so have you ever seen a Super Bowl? Did you see Top Gun? Have you seen any of the other television shows and movies that actually allow the Department of Defense to author and edit scripts if military equipment is even used in what millions of our loved ones think is entertainment? Now, this is so relevant because just like I mentioned earlier, our ideas have genealogies around health, wellness, love, happiness, grief, and the bounds of grief, anger. You know what else has a genealogy? Our ideas about safety, our ideas about security, our ideas about who is entitled to safety and security and at the expense of whom, what peace looks like, what order looks like, what justice looks like, what are ethics, what's morality, what are principles, what's the role of right relationship or of a conscience in our lives, in our professions, in the way that we relate with one another. All of this is getting framed up by the biggest propaganda machine in all of recorded human history for our consumption as entertainment, what more specifically we could call militainment, right? That portmanteau or that combination of militarized entertainment, that then when you go into a session with a client, when you go into a classroom with a student, when we're learning in spaces, is gonna come up in our meaning making and our sense making around just about all of the things to the extent that we haven't consciously reflected upon that indoctrination, right? Again, who is worthy of self-determination and who allegedly is not even capable of that, and who gets to even make those calls, right? And so there's absolutely no sort of tip or technique or trick professionally that allows us to politically bypass understanding what's going on in the world. It might be a deceptively simple response, but whatever we can do to consistently support one another and ourselves staying on point in that way will increase the likelihood that we're also able to hold space for other folks with that depth of honesty and without our ignorances potentially, right, getting in the way of how deeply we're able to hold space for folks in community also.
I was just holding that pause because I think we all needed that after what you just spoke about, Anjali, to let it sink in. Does anyone in the other panelists want to speak to this question? And I can repeat it. How do you connect transformative mental health to this moment as we bear witness to multiple genocides?
This is Umu speaking. I have a short-ish answer. One of the things that comes to mind is the folks in Palestine that are able to exit Palestine and their attempts at having a life in the public eye. I find it really important to name that people who have survived witnessing genocide, people that are surviving, living not in the belly of the beast, are being affected mental health wise, spiritually in a different way than those of us living in the belly of the beast. And it's important for us to offer grace and understanding and care and compassion as mistakes are made, as attempts are made to navigate through this really troubling time. And so I think I bring this up specifically because there's lots of stuff around Motaz, for example, that has been popping up. And I think it's important for us to analyze our power, right? The power gifted to us by academia, the power gifted to us by living in the imperial core as we critique others and what they're going through and what they're making attempts to survive. And so transformative mental health in this moment, as we are bearing witness to multiple genocides, looks like analyzing our power, looks like us responsibly engaging in people power, looks like us not replicating state power. That's my short answer. Thank you.
And this is Maya I think I want to echo what's been named also by Anjali and Evan about history. It's about, I hope this is so clear, in no way minimizing what is happening now and honoring the fact that multiple genocides have occurred and that we can learn from what people have done, that we can slow down for a minute and say, in like actually horrifically and sadly, right? Horrifically and sadly, we can go continent by continent and ask ourselves, what can we learn from people who have fought multiple genocides from generation to generation, whether it was named or unnamed, because of the way colonization works and acts and has continued to work and act, we can learn, and in that learning, connecting to also what Umu was saying, we can learn from past mistakes and give ourselves grace for the current mistakes, right? We can understand that this is not academic and it's not going to be A plus, 1 plus 2 plus 3. It is going to be messy and ugly and painful and beautiful and joyful and everything, but it's going to be everything. Like going back to there's no bad feelings, emotions. It's going to be all of us. It's going to take all of us. So it's going to be all of the things that we are, and none of us are coming at this all right, just by virtue of what we've been born into. We're not coming at this all, well, I shouldn't say that. I am not coming to this whole and healed and ready. No, I need my folks, because when I'm falling apart, I need to know that somebody else is enough, like doing enough, and that hopefully when they're falling apart, I'm doing enough. And I hope that that's a lesson too, like that we're not all going to be all of the things all at once, and we shouldn't be, because then that is taking up too much power. So how do we learn all the things from the people, and while also creating the new things with all the complexity?
I just want to add really quickly. This is Evan speaking, and I love what's been shared. I'm hearing right, Anjali provide a depth of like urgency and just pure depth to the need for political education, so we can extend our matrices of care. And Umu and Maya were talking about just how we also extend care and grace to one another, understanding our positions of power and privilege, so we can materially move this political project forward. And what I wanted to offer was like, I guess like two pieces, right? Uh, Historically, right? Just to show that there are these technologies, there are these strategies, right? We have, waged this fight and won previously, right? I'm thinking about, right, Anjali mentioning the project that she's doing um, out west, and knowing that when it comes to like Angela Davis, for instance, the Bay Area Association of Black Psychologists, Thomas Hilliard and all of them played a key role, right, in making sure that they didn't stack the jury against Angela Davis so that she could, right, represent her truth and get free, right? That's a key example of people performing a radical mental health care project against a system that has nothing but death on its mind, right? Intervening at that critical intersection. And imagine our conversation without the voice of Angela Davis, for instance, right? And there are so many more political prisoners who need that level of support, right? And I want to shift over to like a quote, for example, from Mumia Abu-Jamal, right? There's no borders in consciousness, right? So as we do this education that everybody's talking about, that everybody's sharing, right, it's how we can see people more fully. And I hear everybody speaking to that. I was speaking with somebody from the Genocide and Human Rights Research in Africa and its diaspora, and they had such a deep pain of what was going on in Palestine, while at the same time, for them, to Maiwa's point, they have been doing work on genocide in Africa for decades and could not get anybody to listen. Right? They're like, I was just in Burundi, and people can't even talk about, right, the mass graves that exist here. Like nobody will draw any type of attention to that, right? And so there are a lot of people who've been doing this work, and for them, they feel a level of grief and betrayal, right? And so to Umu Maiwa's point, also holding that, right? There's wounds to be repaired as we, right, collectively move forward against these types of genocides. So yeah, I'm just really taken by the points that have been shared, and I feel like it meets the urgency, both with care and with precision.
Thank you everyone for adding that. And yeah, speaking really to the history and what we can learn from all of these different lineages of resistance. I personally am very pleased to know about this little history of these psychologists in the Bay Area. As someone from Oakland, I'm really glad to know about that, and I will look into that. I think this is a great segue into I have a question for Evan, um, and thinking about our lineages. And so I want to ask you, what knowledge and practices do lineages of Black and decolonial psychology offer us in helping navigate this moment as practitioners and as organizers?
Yeah, of course. And I think this goes back to honestly how we start all our circles is with libation, right? Bringing in ancestors, bringing in traditions, bringing in just all the lineages of people who've done this work. And so thinking about Black psychology, and so that I'm going to name people like Asa Hilliard, I'm going to name people like Kobe Cambone, I'm going to name people like Linda James Myers, Joseph White, right? I'm going to name people like Keffiyeh and Bilashaka in the chat. If you don't know her work, get familiar with it, right? Black psychology is the project of both rerouting our understanding of well-being, our understanding of spiritness, our understanding of our bodies in the most indigenous of wisdoms to meet the political moment where we're at, right? It's recognizing that there is a specific structure of global anti-Blackness that serves to erase the humanity of African descendant peoples and helping to co-create the movement, right, for a people's liberation. Now, there are different arms depending on who you talk to, based on different politics, right? You might get into your people who've been influenced by right, Garveyism, right? More people who might be interested a little bit more in the Fanonian sense. But what Amos Wilson talks about is that diversity of political thought is the health of a movement. You need a diversity of political thought for a movement to succeed. Right? If everybody was in lockstep, we wouldn't be able to have all these different types of strategies and formations. And then when I think about decolonial psychology, I think about the work of or my brother like Devin Atullah. Right? Devin Atullah talks about decolonial psychology as a process of bringing ourselves back to our bodies, right? Bringing ourselves back to the lands, imagining new relationships and old relationships with the lands that we've been dispossessed of, right? And it being materially connected to that political project, right? Decolonial psychology isn't an amorphous imaginary, it's connected to a material connection to land, whose people, whose like ancestors existed with, developed relationship with, right? And trying to retend to that. Now, what all the people in all those distinct movements will say also is that these are, we might say, like translational, right, projects, right? Black psychology, decolonial psychology, we might call that them by those names now, but there might be different words, different formations, different understandings that you might know them through, and that might be more clear moving forward, right? Wade Nobles, he's big on Saku. I don't do psychology, I do Saku. That is more authentic to my indigenous traditions. So people here, you might say, I never heard of Black, how do I get involved with that? But you might know, right, your ancestral wisdoms, you might know, right, these indigenous projects, or you might know the politics that were birthed from that. So for me, my Black psychology, I'm looking at right the legacy of the Haitian Revolution, that Afro-diasporic project of liberation, right, of Haitian Vodou, as for me, some of the highest form of a liberatory, what we might call psychology. And so as we think about imagining these new futures, that's the project of right libation, is naming the people who've come before us to the degree that we can, because a lot of them also waged these wars, they fought these fights, and they had strategies for them that function. And so I'm gonna name in this context Louis Mars, right? Louis Mars is Haiti's first psychiatrist. And so when we think about these decolonial projects of community-based care, taking it outside of the institution, right? How do we do that in the context of the US? Well, like they did that in Haiti, right? They brought in the Vodou practitioners, they brought in the teachers, they brought in the doctors, all these peoples, and created an interlocked system of care that did not require institutionalization. We have a model that he wrote the books. It's all, I gotta brush up on your Creole, but it's all right there, right? And we know what happened to that, right? US pharmacology came in, right, and transformed the whole system. So now when you look at those assignments, the legacy of that, it's full of the all the pitfalls and damages that we recognize today in right the psychiatric institutions, right? But in that block of history, when we name that history, when we know that history, we see visions and futures that we can bring forward to today. That's that Sankofa. So that's how I understand the Black psychology, the decolonial psychology, and how we can rest so much of our political movement on that.
Thank you so much for this. These like little history lessons, and they're so rich. And I'm just, yeah, it was at the tip of my tongue as well. I was thinking when you were talking, it was like Sankofa, was what my thought was, and I am, yeah, so grateful that you've also been collaborating with IDHA. You've been talking about Black psychology and decolonial psychology, and uplifting all of these amazing voices that it's so important for mental health practitioners, psychologists, people who are working in this field to be unlearning and then relearning, re-educating through these means. So thank you so much for all of the wisdom and all the knowledge that you're bringing. Does anybody else want to add to what was shared, or I can move on as well. So I have a question from Iowa to discuss about the relevance of this moment to mental health providers. So my question is, how is this moment relevant to the work that mental health providers do? And how can providers show up in right relationship to collective liberation efforts and provide meaningful support to the people they work with?
This is Maya speaking. So I was biting my tongue to not respond to Evan because I was like, I'm going to respond in my response. So what you said led me to be like, all right, there's a shift that I want to name. So I'm going to do a two-part response. One is that for me, when I think about what mental health providers do, I know oftentimes it becomes the therapeutic room. And to Evan's point and other people's point, let's break that up, right? Like that's not all that we do. And I want to now name, thank you, Evan, radical social workers, predominantly Black and Brown in New York City, who marched with their clients in order to change welfare laws. That's what mental health providers can do. I want to name the Young Lords, who took over Lincoln Hospital in New York City, right? And started doing political education about the relationship between substance use and the destruction of communities and how it's a product. They didn't use colonization, but I would use the product of colonization, right? That this was an intentional addition into communities in order to break political power. Right? Let's talk about that. Let's talk about how they brought acupuncture, like, and at the same time they're doing that political education, how about they brought acupuncture also, right? So there was, how do we do it when there is not this separation of like mental health providers do this and then activists, political educators, healer? No. Who are we as people and what do we want to be in the world? And so then how do we enact that for transformation and change? And so also when I think about, I feel like I've born with feet in different worlds. So it was always like, how do we do all the things all at once? And who grounds me in that as she takes me away is Octavia Butler. So when I think about myself as a mental health person, but as a person, I think of Octavia Butler, who with her stories and narratives 100% created new worlds, but did it in the yes, there's worlds that we want to be and not want to be, but how do we as humans collectively engage in those worlds? What holds us back from being fully human in those worlds? And whether it's literally aliens that are coming and interbreeding with us, whatever it is, there are these questions of not just individual humanity, but collective humanity and what collective humanity can get us, which is often transformative and beautiful, but also can be harmful, dangerous, and painful. And so we need to also own that. As I saw people in the chat talking about, there's spaces where if we do not name what has been done to us and how it has harmed us, we can continue doing it. And I think she offers me that that piece of when we're in liberation, it is us and others, right? So what are we doing with ourselves and all our own stuff so that we're not recreating these systems? And so I think that's I wanted to name that as well. I also want to name like Thomas Sankara, and also somebody who was like political education, new nation, transforming it all, and who are you as a person, right? Like the humanity of it, it was not just ideological or intellectual, it was who are we as people? And why do we deserve better? And why will we claim and be better, right? So all of this is there. And then I guess I do want to speak to the folks who are maybe right now in their spaces kind of like in a mental health space. And I am knee deep in children's books. And these books offer wisdom, man. So the introduction and everybody, sorry, they have wisdom, everyone. And I wanted to provide this quote. Sometimes the first step towards change is closing our eyes, taking a breath, and imagining a different way. And that's Jacqueline Woodson from The Year We Learned to Fly. And what it offers is how do we hold the urgency and the breath? And how do we slow down in times of urgency so that we can be more creative? We can build those relationships. We can connect what we're doing now to a different way, you know, that like the political transformation. Oftentimes I feel like if we don't slow down, what we do is recreate what we know, and we don't let our imagination give us space to create something different. And so I think what I would say is in this moment and kind of in all moments as mental health professionals, how do we both let ourselves slow down in the service of action, right? In the service of ourselves, but in the service of action. And so I don't know that I have a specific quote unquote answer, but I do have questions. How do we sustain ourselves for the long haul? This is not a thing that I will be doing in this one, you know, meeting with this one particular client, right? If we're doing transformation, then that's the generations, right? I think of people like Veronica Agard, who talks about being an ancestor in training, which felt really powerful to me. How am I doing what I am doing now? Not just for me, not just for the people around me, but for those 7, 9, 10 generations, right? So how do I do that? How do I think about that? How do I, and for me, there is spirit, there is faith, there is community, there is love that's there for that long haul, and pain. How do I consider me in all of my positions and positionality, right? My power, my capacity, my reality, because as we are talking about genocide, we cannot take away the fact that people are experiencing everyday pain in conjunction. It's the poly crisis, right? We have family members who are in pain and in crisis, who are in dealing with the medical industrial complex, the mental health industrial complex. We're having people in prisons. We're having people who are just like constrained and pushed and like just feeling like there's just nothing. There's the hopelessness, there's our climate. What about our relationship to our literal earth, and can we care about that? Can we care about the fact that our earth is literally crying for us to stop? And it's not even our earth, the earth is crying for us to stop. Can we listen for that? What do I have to give, and what do I need to receive, right? What risks am I willing to take? And let's be honest about that. Because again, some of us have different responsibilities, and I think we should be honest about that. That's why part of why I love the 26 ways to be in the struggle without being in the streets, I believe it's called. We have different things that we can offer. And protest is beautiful and we should do it. And not everybody can do that. Not everyone can risk that for a variety of reasons. So let's be honest. And then what we can risk, maybe challenge ourselves to push it a little further, but risk it. So not just say it, but like, what are we going to do? And then I think I said it before, right? Who am I accountable to? What communities, what peoples, what histories, what lineages, who am I accountable to, and how do I continue in that? And then what wisdoms and what stories do I know from my people, from my history? And I am very aware of cultural appropriation, do not get me wrong, but in the same way that we can have chosen family, I think that we can also be connected to lineages and cultures that we can appreciate and connect to without appropriating, but maybe aren't, you know, directly ours. That's a further longer conversation, but I do want to say, like, I've learned wisdoms and stories from other people without having to claim that I am them. I am them. So what are the wisdoms and stories that we are utilizing in these moments so that we can show up for that collective liberation? Where's the honesty that I'm going to have with myself and with other folks. Because over and over again, if trauma taught me nothing, trauma disconnects, and healing happens in community, but it's not always the community we're born into, right? We can have healing in all other communities. We can do healing. I think is space for healing on your own. But if we're looking for that true collective transformation, that true transformation, individuals by yourself don't fight, like you can't win against a system. We have to do it in the we. And so how can we do that with honesty, with transparency, accountability, and with power, with knowing our own power? So, and then lastly, I'd also say, like, how can we tell our stories that are not only about oppression, but how do we tell the stories of our wins too, right? And our wins that weren't based on domination, but our wins that were based on, like, we did that. And how do we celebrate those too?
Yeah, thank you for that share, Maya. I'm just the image of like these clients and the people they're working with, and then the professional and therapist being hand in hand, protesting together is like really etched in my mind of like the potential of like how people can show up right now. Um, and yeah, I'm curious how others in this panel, if they'd like to respond to this one, specifically also thinking about, bringing these conversations into a session. How is this helping support a client right now? Is it? And yeah, just curious to hear about that or any other perspectives that people would like to share.
I want to name, this is Evan speaking, name something really quick. This just uplifts everything that Maya was saying. And there's just two pieces of recent and like older history that I love, because I heard you talking about something like deeper than solidarity, the way that people can be like kind of culturally tied beyond, regardless of appropriation, right? We're not talking about appropriation, we're talking about kind of deep kind of spirit commitments. And for me, I think about the project of like New Guinea, right? Where you had African peoples, indigenous peoples come together to kind of co-form a location out here. I wish I knew, I wish I was more, this is my challenge to get better, the indigenous name for the actual lands, but coming together, right, to from the collection of cultural and spiritual visions, like creating like land, creating space, creating a way to be together. Right. And so we have the social technologies, we have the history, we have the lineages of doing precisely that. And the recent history I think about is, if anybody's familiar with the Uhuru Three, right? The African Internationalist Party, right, who recently had the FBI raid their facilities for their kind of radical organizing for their African internationalist politics. And the Uhuru Three are, one, the chairman Omali Yeshitela, and then two people from their solidarity network, right? So two people who are racialized as white, who are deeply committed to that political struggle of African internationalism and Black liberation, right? Again, just goes to show that we can have these commitments deeper than, right, the ideas of appropriation. We can connect on the level of spirit, on the level of culture, on the level of politics.
And this is Maya, and just naming, Noah, what you're saying about kind of with the person in the room, what I think about is like, what is our goal, right? Are we treating people? Because then that's gonna take you on one direction, and I can't speak to that, right? Are we with people? And are we bearing witness with people? And that's a different conversation to me. And so if we're bearing witness to people, are we creating a space where we know that they can tell us what they need to tell us? And then how do we respond? Are we saying things like oh, well, is that safe, as the be all and end all question? Or are we saying things that are more expansive, like, what are you hoping for that? What are you dreaming for that? What do you need from that? What would you want? Like, how are we holding expansiveness so that we're not sitting here telling people you need to X, Y, and Z, but that we're showing folks that the expansiveness of who you are and what you want and need, we can hold that. And if that expansiveness is like, we need to talk about the politics of what's happening here and how at work and how you could talk, or we need to talk about the fact that, yeah, you want to go to that commune, you want to build something else, or you want to go to that country and you want to engage in the freedom fighting. But it becomes like, how much can we hold with people and how much can we bear witness to? Because we don't have to say anything. People can pick up on it. They know if you're open and willing, if you are in a space of expansiveness, or if you're in a place of like, I'm constricted. And so, yes, it's what we say, I think, in the space, but it's also who we are and how we come into that space and that deeper energy of who we are. It's what we stand for. I mean, it's like people have been calling out therapists all over Instagram and everyone else. Are you saying some stuff? Like people don't need to be. I just took a training with somebody and she was like, I have a list. So you're not calling me until you read that list. And if you didn't read the list, I will tell it to you over the phone. So where do we land? And where's our invitation to move with people?
Yes, to all of that. Thank you for that addition, Maya. I want to move to a next question because we're almost, I can't believe, closing. So I have a question for Umu. And this is a question that was inspired from your radical mental health first aid workshop, where you started off with acknowledging, like, if you are not driven mad by this moment of genocide, then I don't know what's going on. But yeah, as you of others have shared, the violence and the genocide that we're witnessing at this moment is maddening. How can we learn from the wisdom of those who identify as mad, disabled, or mentally ill to navigate this time of mental crisis?
Yes, this is Umu speaking. During a lot of my workshops, I will sometimes invite people during the grief and genocide acknowledgement part go mad, to go mad in whatever ways they have safety to do so, right? And so I want to name that experiencing madness publicly is not something that everyone is afforded. In fact, it's actually something that is actively being criminalized in the so-called United States, in Canada, in lots of other places. And so, yes, invitation to go mad if you're not already mad at what it is that you're witnessing, and also lots of grace and compassion, right, for our collective inability, especially those of us that are racialized as Black, our collective inability to present our body minds in ways that are authentic and natural to us because of fear of policing and carceral interventions and colonial helping styles that truly are not supportive of what it is that we would benefit from. And so something that I mentioned earlier in the workshop is my like lifelong relationship to the unseen, right? And so I have been gifted to have a mom that also has an interesting relationship to the unseen, something that used to really stress me out. I have one of those moms where it's like, can you really see in the back of your head? And it's like, she can't see in the back of her head, but she can see things that I can't see, right? And so I bring up this relationship to the unseen, this acknowledgement that we can have this relationship to madness, have this relationship to the veil in varying flavors and varying ways. And we can use that madness in service of solidarity, in service of shifting what it is that we're witnessing that is contributing to our madness. I'm going to pause there and drink some coffee. Oh, I see somebody asked about the my radical mental health first aid workshop. I did one with IDA, but if you'd like to do a live workshop, I do them monthly. And so follow me on something wherever I am. And we'll offer that info later. Now, I've been mentioning about like anti-Black sanism a lot, and I just want to like deepen that conversation a little bit. And highlight an article that I recently came across. I'm a very big reader, a lifelong learner. I hate academia, but I am always willing to read what academia is like pumping out so I can critique it. Now, I think I may have sent something in the chat. If it doesn't work, we'll send it in we'll send it in an attachment in the future. So this article is titled An Introduction to Anti-Black Sanism, and it is really a profound article and something that I wish I would have read years ago because it just really highlights the relationship between sanism, the relationship between anti-Blackness, ableism, and how all of those things compounding together makes it difficult to live with madness while Black. Makes it really difficult to do so in a way where especially when we are again living in the belly of the beast, to do so in a way that can invite people to like witness what's happening so they can be inspired to also engage in that kind of madness. And so the invitation from this conversation and from this portion of the panel is to practice madness and to practice allowing your body mind, right, to present in the ways that it's seeking to do so desperately in ways that feel safe enough. And sometimes that might look like practicing madness in the shower where no one else can see you. And maybe you scream, you wail, you try to like reason with the ancestors, ask them for some guidance. And that's where you practice that and your ability to engage in distress tolerance around what if somebody sees or hears me gets to be an experiment. And over the course of time, maybe you'll also wail in the grocery store. Maybe over the course of time, you'll also tell your boss, like, these genocides have been breaking my heart and I'm actually not coming to work this week. And that won't be something that you're prepared to throw up over. So those are some of my notes around just allowing yourself to become mad, allowing yourself to be moved by your madness, and allowing yourself to gain wisdom from whatever flavor of madness you have. Because what's beautiful about all of our experiences, those of us that experience madness, we have our own flavor, we have our own relationship to it, our own understanding of it, and also our own like maybe cultural influences as to like how it is expressed. Right. And so I think those are the things I want to name without getting too researchy and more.
Can I ask something real quick? This is Maya speaking. I love the expressing madness. And I also wonder, what would you say to folks? Because part of it is your own experience, but how about like the bearing witness of it?
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. So bearing witness to madness is something that I think we also have to, and I'm using have to very loosely, but maybe strongly. We have to learn to build up the stress around, right? Because we are not afforded the gift of being able to like see this out in the open. And so for some of us, we might go into nervous system dysregulation. We might feel confused. We might feel fear. We might not know what to do. We might think the person is in crisis and then start to respond with carceral interventions. Meanwhile, that person is literally so fine, and you're actually the one that's kind of strange for wanting to bring in the police. So thank you for bringing up that question, right? Like there is a necessity, I think, for us. We have to learn how to tolerate witnessing people's madness. We have to. Otherwise, we will not be able to learn from the madness of our African, our indigenous, including African and Black movement leaders that have been doing this for a very long time. And so this invitation, you can practice this even like when you're traveling on the MTA, for example, in New York City. New York City has a beautiful flavor of madness everywhere. And when you see it, notice what's happening in your body. Ask yourself, do I feel fear? Do I feel like I'm in danger? Do I feel like someone needs to come and suppress this? Where did I learn this? How can I unlearn this and unlearn it fast? Because this thing that I'm fearful of is gonna land someone in jail or get someone killed. We have history that tells us this. I can name you off the longest and saddest list ever of all of the people, especially Black folks that are mad and or disabled, that have been victimized and brutalized and traumatized as a result of this anti-Black Satanism. Thanks, Mayowa. Word to you.
Yeah, thank you both. And just really resonating with this this invitation to go mad and to bear witness to madness, and that Satanism, that's something I've been reflecting, how Satanism is just affecting that invitation so much. We can't really feel into that madness or our reaction to what is happening because we're so worried about being incarcerated or institutionalized. And it's just, yeah, it's really something to acknowledge. So thank you for sharing that. And if folks don't know about decarcerating care, this is something that we talk about in IDHA as well, in that event where we think about the carceral nature of mental health as well. So I can't believe we're almost to the end. I want to give enough time for this question because I think it's a really good one, a really important one, and also trying to leave us with some feeling of like hope and like, can we, what can we do? So for everyone, briefly I would love for you to talk about what advice do you have for care workers seeking to take action, but struggling to resist despair and identify their own unique role in the fight for collective liberation.
I'm happy to jump in real quick and just share. So a quote from a land defender who passed away at the end of December, Klee Benally, a Dene warrior and punk musician who some of y'all might be familiar with, so from the Navajo Nation. And he very famously said, "Hope is not the opposite of despair, action is." So again, and this is Anjali speaking, quote, "Hope is not the opposite of despair, action is," end quote. And that was from Klee Benally. And so as opposed to sort of contrasting, like I want to get involved in something, but I'm despairing, I wonder about that kind of reframe that Klee has invited us to consider as a frontline land defender, especially in light of, like Evan, what you were speaking to about the importance of land and land defense and relationality in decolonization that I've heard, right, actually everyone speak to in different ways on the panel tonight. Those of us who have a relationship with listening, with land and with water and with other elements. Also, what is our responsibility to honor what we presence, what we feel, what we hear, what we see, especially when that's not normalized for us for so many of us, that does require some kind of action. And so action can actually be such a powerful aid to counter unnecessary despair. How to get there when we're in a space of despair can be easier said than done, for sure. And especially for folks who are seeking a space to kind of get in where they fit in, I would invite the kind of slowness, Mayowa, that I heard you speaking to earlier, not some kind of compulsion to rush. We know that the so-called road to hell is paved with good intentions. So many of the messes that need to be cleaned up in the world today were from hasty, well-intended actions. And so I would invite intentionality and that collective or community accountability in listening to the requests for solidarity and the demands for solidarity directly from, whether it is folks in Sudan, folks in Gaza, folks in the Congo, and so on and so forth. And so that relationality, we don't have to create ideas as a figment of our imagination. We can listen to each other. So starting off listening to each other and then seeing accordingly, where do we have the capacity to be able to show up and recognize what an honor it is to be able to show up for each other based off of those requests and demands for solidarity.
This is Umu speaking. I am a lover of IFS and parts work, not because of the white people that are teaching it, but because of my Africanness and the connection to African wisdom and spirituality. And so I want to name that if you have parts of you that are feeling despair, I invite you to, if it feels good, to embrace those parts of you that feel despair as lovers. Embrace those parts of you that feel despair as friends. Embrace those parts of you that feel despair as partners that have so much wisdom to offer. And so that despair is not something to be rid of, right? We don't need to get rid of despair, but we can be with despair in a way that doesn't center this, like, again, anti-Black Satanism, getting rid of the despair, because despair makes us feel crazy or mad or just not good, whatever the words are. And so again, the invitation with the parts of us that feel despair is to embrace it as a lover, a friend, a comrade, or a partner.
And this is Maiwa speaking. And Umu, I love that. And yes, I love that also IFS that I've learned has all been through Black folks. And it's some stuff, right? Like I'm gonna also love on your connecting it to Africanness too, because when I think about my tradition through my dad is the Yoruba tradition, and it's all the parts, right? Like the spirits hold the different parts and embody us with, I mean, so we can do that for days. So just thank you for naming that. And I think I would also want to offer to this conversation, like, to the extent possible, let's not internalize capitalism, right? Let's not internalize things around whether it's perfection or the I or the winning or the only, and not that we should not want to win, but that winning is the only thing that matters, right? Going back to the, how do we slow down? How do we figure out our place? How do we connect it to our histories and ancestors and their stories and wisdom while honoring and creating our own? How do we have things like gratitude? Even gratitude for the despair, because all of our feelings are telling us something, right? If we didn't feel the despair, we wouldn't act because we'd be complacent. So what can we get from all of our feelings? How can we celebrate when we do realize what we want to realize? How do we center love, and what did someone say? Like, not the anemic love, but the love in action that says we're all worth it, all, period. We're all worth it. We're worth the sacrifices, we're worth the pain and the despair, but we are worth more than all of that, right? We are worth more We are worth just that inherent, like, I'm going to take it there, that inherent thing when you see the kids engaging with each other, like the little kids. Can we do more of that? Right? Kids will just be like, hey, here's my best friend. Like, what's their name? I don't know. Where'd you find them? I don't know. But we're best friends because we connected and we had fun and we're in community and we're good. And that other stuff you're asking me, that's not the heart of this connection. It's like, and when do we start losing that? When did we start losing that? We are worth it. We are in this together and we're going to do this together. And there's some stuff that are important, but maybe they're not the most important things. Maybe it's and that's the unseen. Maybe that unseen and those connections and those spirits and those intertwined bonds. Maybe that's the stuff that we can also be naming, because I'm also not this person who's like, let's not talk about systems, let's not talk about anti-Blackness. Like, we got to talk about all that. And just an and.
This is Evan speaking, and I'm wishing I had waited to go last because this is incredible wisdom that's been shared. The things that I'm really resonating with are, right, everybody's discussion and centering of collectivity, right? The collectivity that all of us possess, right? In spirit and in person, right? Especially again, we've talked about indigenous African. I'm also thinking about within Vodou, right? Like there's this essential multiplicity that we have as individuals. And so to that very point, right? The despair exists with hope, exists with happiness, exists with pain, right? These things aren't in contradiction, they exist. Is Leonard James Myers would say is diunidal. To the question I'm thinking about, the George Jackson quote where he says, discover your humanity and your love in revolution, right? So there's the piece of the preparation, the education that's necessary to deeply learn the specificity that's been shared today, right? It's not just say it's anti-Black Satanism. We have to understand how each of these psychological, structural forces operate. We need that depth of understanding, and you form that depth you can form that depth in movement, right? Like you can find your responsibility in movement. You can find a purpose in movement. And I mean that materially. Like a really quick anecdote is when I went to go volunteer at an asylum shelter in New York City. And I'm coming fresh off my degree. I'm thinking, oh, I'm Black psychologist XYZ. Here I come with all my academics and books. This is going to be the best thing. And they asked me, like, oh, we're happy you're here. Could you go move the cabbages from this thing to that thing? I'm like, oh, all right. Right. In that moment, the most salient piece, I'm able-bodied. I have big enough arms to carry a box of cabbages. And that's what was needed, right? That was purpose in movement. And it's essential, right? And so you can form that love, you can find that purpose, you can find those commitments when you just engage with the peoples that you care about.
Beautiful. Thank you all for those parting words, and I feel like there was things shared tonight that I really need to hear. I'm gonna end this call and live up on my despair a bit. So yeah, thank you. Um, so I'm going to transition us and have the faculty, I'm going to invite them to briefly share about their lessons in the core curriculum. So just wanted to share that currently the Transformative Mental Health core curriculum is open with enrollment. All of these lovely faculty have some amazing lessons in this curriculum, and yeah, learning experience, which is one of the formats in the curriculum, is currently in open enrollment until March 4th. And you can learn more about that curriculum, the link in the chat, or just going on IDHA website. So this is a little bit about the curriculum. I won't read all of this, but you can get all of this information online as well. But we have 50 faculty bridging lived experience and research with professional expertise. This is a curriculum for mental health practitioners and care workers. but we also think it's going to be relevant to so many other people. There's 2 different formats. You can move through this learning experience over 4 months, convening in bi-weekly meetings to discuss what you're learning, or you can also take it self-paced and just get all of the access all at once and move through it at your own. 22 hours of video content, and there's a lot of different pricing slides, scales, so that you to make it as accessible as possible for folks. These are all of the lovely faculty that I was mentioning, and yeah, really bridging a lot of professional and lived experience as well. I won't go through the modules in depth, but yeah, just to give you some visuals about what is discussed in each of these modules. Um, these are the first 4, and these are the last 4. Yeah, really just thinking about mental health in very different the many frameworks and perspectives that we can think about mental health through, talking about all of the liberation struggles that contributed to our current system, and also the activism that continues to carry forth, and the tools and practices that can be seen as alternatives, that you can integrate to your practice as well. We also have CE credits for the curriculum. So psychologists, social workers, counselors, therapists, all of these folks can get 20.75 CEs, and also 20 CE credits for New York Certified Peer Specialists. So you can find out more about that on our website as well. So I'm going to invite the panelists to briefly share just a little bit about the lessons that they did in the curriculum. So yeah, Evan, if you wanted to share briefly about these lessons you did.
Yeah, and I'm very thankful for Umu for throwing the alley-oop, because that was a brilliant, in many ways, like introduction into what this lesson was about, right? Talking about how, like Terry Alice Pickens says, in the context of the United States, anti-Blackness has shaped conceptions of madness, right? Has shaped the stigma people have with madness, and vice versa. And so in the lesson, we go through the deep history of that. You can trace the lineage of that idea. Like Angela was saying, you can trace the lineage of that idea from enslavement, how it shaped practices of mental health, going from ideas of drapetomania, protest psychosis, intellectual and genetic inferiority, to what we see today, right? Rejecting the myth that the American Psychological Association puts out around progress, right? When we know our institutions of mental health are just as carceral as ever, right? And so the lesson lays out that lineage while at the same time offering some alternatives based in distinct mental health movements.
Thank you, Evan. Maya, you have 3 lessons in the curriculum if you wanted to, yeah, just briefly, whatever you want to share from these.
So yeah, real briefly, really having just like what IDA does, having a systemic analysis of it all. And so what are the forms of oppression that we're seeing in the current US mental health system, both with the people who are receiving quote unquote care in it, but also the oppression differentially experienced by the people who are supposed to be providing care. And it's that reality that this system is not serving anyone. And so talking more about that. Conceptualizing the norm and the other. So really naming this idea of what's connected to saneism is the idea that there is some mythical norm that honestly, when you start listing all of the qualities, it's like 5 people maybe, and just dig a little deeper. And so what is this norm that we've all been kind of sold and lied to about, and who's that based on? Kind of white, able-bodied, cisgender, monogamous, Judeo-Christian, middle to upper class, like man. And then, who is that? And why is that normal? How did it get that way? And how have we internalized it? And then also, and the fallacy of it, and the beauty of not being the norm. And even that language, but talk about in the training, and then also lessons for intersectional futures, equity, and decentering whiteness, which is just that. How do we go to our own stories and our own wisdoms? And how do we center that, knowing that in these United States, it is people of color, it is Black folks, it is Indigenous folks that have been kind of harmed historically and currently now, and how do we decenter that to focus on our, again, own wisdom and knowledge?
Thank you very much, Mahewa. We have Anjali, if you want to share about your lessons.
For sure. So the couple that I created were on liberation psychology and then decolonial and political psychiatry. So in terms of the liberation psychology piece, I don't know that we've explicitly shared, we have in other words, but shout out to our martyrs, right? I really want to name, so not just political prisoners, right? Evan, like you named, thank you for that, invoking Mumia and others, but also to, right, our folks who have actually been killed for the work that they've done. And so of course, here I'm in part referencing Dr. Ignacio Martín Baró. So hi, this is Anjali speaking. Sorry for the late piece. I'm showing actually a book right now on my screen, Writings for a Liberation Psychology, that's a collected volume of essays of Dr. Martín Barós, who was assassinated in El Salvador after 6 assassination attempts, actually, by a local death squad that was trained by the US Army. And so it's important to name, right, in terms of the lineages that we're learning from, when people are risking their lives at this level and facing, right, that degree of state repression, there's a different kind of stakes involved in part, if you ask me, taking seriously what was the danger posed to the status quo, right, of a psychologist engaged in what kind of practice that could merit that sort of response. And I'll share even just one line from the book, actually, just as a little snippet in terms of that lineage, right? Specifically of, right, from the so-called Central American region, right, from Salvador in particular, this school of liberation psychology. So in this text, towards the beginning, there's a quote that reads, "What could he learn that would be helpful to his own task of creating and applying a psychology in the service of the Salvadorian people's struggle for freedom and justice?" That was a guiding question of Dr. Martín Barós in envisioning, shall we say, his scope of practice. What can he learn that would be as supportive as possible for where he was based, the Salvadorian people's struggle for freedom and justice? So that's a little bit of what we get into, right, in that liberation psychology module. And then we get into, in large part, some of the inspiration to learn from Dr. Franz Omar Fanon in the decolonial and political psychiatry vignette. I know that some folks in the chat have named, right, that y'all are coming into your own practices, and that's part of how you're situated within the field of mental health in this moment, doing this kind of learning. And there is so much for us to get into, right, learning from Dr. Fanon around different takes on professionalism, so to speak, right? His understanding that the folks that he had an ethical responsibility to be supporting actually required, so in large part, for example, the kicking out of the French colonizers in Algeria, right? Not any individual pathologizing of folks who were experiencing ongoing atrocities, right? And so he picked up arms and supported the Algerians kicking the colonizers out of their country. That is one lesson in professional ethics that we would be well advised to take seriously in this moment.
Thank you, Anjali. And next we have Umu.
This is Umu speaking. I contributed 2 different videos, both really connected to how to shift your practice as a provider and bring in more radical ways of being, more radical ways of thinking, more radical ways of responding, and specifically responding to suicide and other types of crises or stressors, therapy seekers might experience. And so 2 lessons, short and sweet. One of them goes over my abolition informed safety plan that I created because, as we know, safety plans that are created by these institutions are boring and bland, and I hate them personally. So what did I do? I made a new one. And you can find it in these modules. You're welcome.
Thank you, faculty. All of your lessons are incredible, and yeah, I would love for anyone on this call, if you're interested in this curriculum, to ask us any questions you have in our email, or check out our website. Yeah, just to say that the cycle for enrolling for the curriculum learning experience is going to close on Friday, March 1st at midnight. And we have a limited number of seats for the cohort groups that meet. So if you want to do that, you should maybe hop on it soonish, and then self-paced, the enrollment is not capped. So that's open year round. So you can enroll whenever you want. So just to follow up for this event, I know a lot of people probably want to watch this back to get all of the knowledge that was shared. So we're going to be sharing the event recording, the closed caption transcript, and an event feedback form as well, because we would love to hear your feedback about it as well. We also would love for you to join us in our community of mental health change makers. So if you become a member, you are really entering this transformative mental health community. There's a ton of perks that you can see in our membership if you go on our website and check that out. And lastly, stay in touch with us. We have our all of our links here. If you like to follow us, we have a newsletter if you want to get on that as well. We have Facebook, Twitter, all of that. So get connected. So with that, I want to thank from the bottom of my heart these wonderful panelists for coming to you to share all of this wisdom, all of this knowledge, their heart with you all. And I want to wish everyone a lot of deep care and solidarity across my interwebs to you. I hope that you sit with all of that was shared tonight, and yeah, feel free to just continue connecting with us, and yeah, take care. So with that, the panelists want to say goodbye, either wave or do whatever, invited that, but I'm gonna sign it off. Thank you, everybody. Bye.